If this was 15, 16 years ago when I weighed 300 pounds, but I knew what I knew today, what would I do differently? I mean, I lost over 100 pounds. I felt fine the way that I did it, and I'm happy the way that I did it. But fact of the matter is people ask me, I mean, knowing what I know now, would I do things differently? And there's a few little things. Some of them are tactical things, and I'm going to share them. Some of them are heavy, real, and raw, and it might turn some people off, but it also might help people. And the goal here is to help people. So you want to make an omelet, you got to kind of break a few eggs. And the first thing I'll just jump right in and say is collagen protein. I probably should have used collagen protein more because at that weight, working out as hard as I was working out, I think I did do some damage to my joints. I did a lot of pounding, a lot of trying to run. I was one of these guys that maybe you can relate to this. I was 300 pounds, but I'm like, no, I want to get this weight off of me. So I would just go run, right? And I was 300 pounds, I should not have been running, right? That was hard on my body. And now the evidence is pretty strong on collagen protein being really good for that. So, back then it was sort of like, oh, collagen doesn't do anything. It just goes into the amino acid pool with all the other proteins and yada, yada. And now we're seeing no, it actually does have, at the very least, subjective improvement in terms of joint health. So I definitely would have done that. But now let's kind of get into a little bit more of kind of the weight loss stuff and some of the real stuff. I probably would have done more workouts in a fed state. Now, the reason I say that is I'm a big proponent of working out fasted, and I feel like it works extremely, extremely, extremely well for fat loss. But one of the things that I realized happened, and this occurred to me 7 years after my weight loss journey really ended, was that I had trained myself to train in a fasted state so much that when I trained in a fed state, I could barely even work out. I felt terrible. So I missed out on lots of opportunities to work out in the afternoon. Time didn't really allow me to work out in the morning, so then I would eat, but then I would convince myself that I felt so cruddy with food in my system that I actually wouldn't work out in the afternoon. So I ended up skipping workouts by doing that, right? So that's the way that it felt when I was losing weight, is if I didn't work out in the morning, I just wouldn't work out. And it wasn't just because of time. It was because I was convinced that it was real. I couldn't work out really well with food in my stomach. And I've realized now that if I just occasionally train with some food in my stomach, it makes a really, really big difference. It teaches my body that it can do that. But I've also noticed that it's helped occasionally with energy demands. I can do longer workouts if I have a little bit of fuel. Not necessarily carbs or anything, but a little bit of fuel. And then, of course, I still train fasted most of the time. Now I'll jump back to kind of a fun one, just to keep everything kind of exciting. And by the way, can you please drop a comment for the algorithm? If this video is going to help you or it emotionally connects with you, that's what I want to be all about. I really want to drive connection. I think we're in a generation where I don't know, if there's not connection on the internet, it's not going to go anywhere. So drop a comment if this relates to you or just for the algorithm. It does help the video get out to more people. Maybe this can help more people. But this next one, I probably would have used more mustard. And this sounds funny, you might make fun of me for it, but the evidence is so strong on mustard and appetite and the TRPV1 receptors. And I kind of avoided condiments. I tried to go things kind of bland a lot of times. I would have used the heck out of mustard, it's a random thing, but knowing what I know now and knowing how powerful mustard is for appetite suppression, I would have literally put mustard on more things and maybe it would have curbed some of my cravings. I can't promise it would have done anything different through my weight loss. I can't promise it would have happened faster, but it probably would have made things a little easier, and it's something that I would definitely have done. Now, the next one, I would have dealt with my emotional shit. Okay? Now, you might want to skip through this because you're like, no, I just want the tactics. I just want the real resource stuff that I get from Thomas. And I get it. And that's the brand that I've created. But let me be real. Okay. Over the last year, it has been nothing short of amazing, the mindset shift that I've been able to have by dealing with my demons, dealing with my emotional stuff, getting some help that I need in that category, and also being able to conquer those demons and understand why I do things the way that I do them. It's allowed me to release and submit, and quite honestly, even have a touch of spirituality in my life that I didn't have before. That's allowed me to not be so obsessed over food. But the funny thing and the uncanny thing is that by not obsessing over food so much, I make better, clearer choices. It's funny that when we're operating out of fear all the time, when we're in that sympathetic tone all the time, it's harder to make good decisions. But when we're a little more relaxed and we're not stressed about the things that we shouldn't be stressed about because we have no control over them anyway, then it's amazing how the choices just kind of fall in line. So that's something I would have done sooner, because I put myself through the ringer in terms of body composition issues, body dysmorphia, all through my weight loss. And quite frankly, it's taken me until just in the last year to be able to come to grips with it. So yes, I've had some assisted therapies that have really helped a ton, and I think that I would have done that sooner had it been available to me. Next one, back to the tactical stuff. I would have used glutamine and at least bone broth more. I started using bone broth like 6-7 years ago, but I probably would have started using glutamine sooner, because the reason is I compromised my immune system a lot when I was dieting, and it happens to a lot of people that are losing weight. And what I realized is it was mostly a gut health thing, and glutamine definitely made a big difference. So when I would train hard, I'd add glutamine in, and it would reduce my instances of coming down with something. And I think a lot of it, again, it had to do with just gut barrier integrity. And now we know so much that glutamine fuels those enterocytes within the gut. So for anyone that's like reducing calories and stressing their body, I think 5 grams of glutamine is probably a reasonable thing, and I would go back in time and do that. The next one is something I've talked about all the time, but it would just be really cruel of me to not mention it because it's so important. I would have paid more attention to eating more and moving more. I was so focused on fasting. And again, all these things worked. So please don't say or think that like you shouldn't do what I did. What I did worked. If I could refine it, I would have eaten a little bit more and moved a little bit more, because there definitely were periods of time when I would elect to just eat less and then trade it off by not moving as much too. So it was a bad situation. I would have rather eaten more and then gone out and forced myself to move more and kept that metabolic rate higher so that I didn't have to undo work so much later on, because I understand that this is my profession. As a nutrition professional, it's my job to like stay in shape and focus on these things. If someone doesn't have the time to like put into, hey, how do I get my metabolism back on track and things like that, that could be really, really hard. The next one kind of falls in line with that. I wouldn't have fasted every day. Now, I've talked about that before, so that's fine. Like I probably did too much consistent fasting in the beginning, especially in the very beginning, before I ever had this channel. I was fasting almost every day, and pretty much every day. And I think I really crashed my metabolism. And it wasn't until I brought kind of some low carb, higher calorie stuff into the mix that I sort of course corrected that. But I definitely wouldn't have started off fasting quite like that. I would have done what I do now, which is 2 or 3 or maybe 4 days even at that point a week of fasting, but go longer, more aggressive fasts. And I would have just handled the longer fasts. And I think I would have added on top of that is I would have known how to use salt to curb cravings, right? That was a big thing for me. I have a sweet tooth. I've always had a sweet tooth. And I've learned now that salt really curbs my cravings. And it does for a lot of people. Those NST neurons, that plays a really big role. When we're craving something sweet, a lot of times we're actually craving salt because we need salt for survival. So until our sodium's met, we're going to keep craving sweet things in essence. Kind of that way with calcium too, and a lot of our minerals. But I started using electrolytes like maybe 6-7 years ago. Before I wasn't really using them, and things got easier when I used electrolytes. I put a link down below for the LMNT electrolytes that I've used. Again, this wouldn't be a Thomas DeLauer video without at least mentioning one of my sponsors, right? This is how we make money and it's how the business works, but it's also what I use, right? So I use those LMNT electrolytes, and it is definitely a game changer for me, like a very, very real thing. And there's a very clear line in the sand from pre-electrolyte Thomas and post-electrolyte Thomas, all the way down to like my skin complexion, but most of all, my appetite, my ability to kind of control my appetite, my energy when I would fast. So the link down below is for a free sample variety pack with any purchase, but I also recommend their sparkling electrolytes. So drink lmnt.com/Thomas. The next thing is I would have accepted Anecdote and bro science more. What's funny is, when I was an athlete in high school, I always listened to bro science, and it worked really, really well for me. But I always chalked it up to the fact that maybe it worked because I was a kid. And then I got older and I would only listen to things that were rooted in evidence. And then I realized that evidence is great, and I love science. You watch this channel, it's all science, all evidence. But the reality and the fact of the matter is that evidence is all that we can really hang our hat on. It doesn't mean that there's not 99.9% more things that are out there in the world that just haven't been discovered yet. So sometimes the bro science and the anecdote and what works is some of the best stuff. So now I don't always care if there's a peer-reviewed journal saying that it works for other people or not. If I know it works for me, and even if it's placebo, it works for me. And I'm going to share that with you, and you can see for yourself. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe it won't. But I can be a light, and I can help maybe get people some passion to try something different. I'm going to do it. And I would do it for myself too. Next, I would have carb cycled more. I would have, I went through a phase where I carb cycled and I didn't give it enough time. Carb cycling works really well. I go periods of time where I fast, where I go like a few days super low carb, and then I'll go one day where I carb up. And the thing is that works really, really, really well because I don't need to have carbs every day. I need the occasional carbohydrate bolus to teach my body how to use them to restore glycogen if it's depleted, if I'm training hard, but I certainly don't need carbs every day. And if I had taught myself that, it would have gotten me through this phase where I demonized carbs too much, and I would have been able to get where I am now a little bit sooner, which is quite frankly just less headache. So if I talked to my 300-pound self 15, 16 years ago, I'd say, hey, a couple days a week, cycle some carbs in, and then go low carb after that, and you'll see how you feel. See, unless you were trying to go strict keto, which I was at certain points in time, I would have just started carb cycling sooner, and I'd encourage myself to keep that open mind. Next one's kind of funny. I would have sleep divorced way earlier. My wife and I have been together since high school. I was 16, she was 14. Yeah, cradle robber. And we're still together. And we went, 19 years of our 21 years together where we would sleep together because that was the way it was supposed to be. And then one day I realized, I think sleep is more important than actually just like sleeping together. If I get my sleep, I can be a better husband during our waking hours. I don't care about what we're like in our sleep. I don't care what dream Thomas is or dream my wife Amber is. The point is we sleep in separate bedrooms a lot of the times. And it doesn't matter because we love each other and we love our sleep. And that's what matters so that we can come together. And I would have done that so much sooner because holy cow, that made the biggest difference for me professionally. So I encourage you, have the confidence, ditch the ego. If you need to sleep in another bed, sleep in another bed. A very big one is I would have reverse dieted every 8 weeks or so for 2 weeks. Reverse dieting is where you come off whatever dietary restrictions you have in terms of calories and you elevate that up to your maintenance level for a couple of weeks. So let's say, for example, you're eating 2,000 calories a day on a diet, okay? You might bump that back up to what your maintenance calories are for 2 weeks, not what you were eating before you started dieting. So don't go back up to like 4,000. You might bump up to like 2,300, and you might even gain a little bit of weight for 2 weeks. But we're starting to see with the reverse dieting literature that about every 8 weeks, you kind of establish this set point. So when you restrict calories, do it for 8 weeks or so, and then kind of recycle and go back to slightly higher calories, back up to maintenance for your current weight, not your old weight, and then do it again. I would have done that, but that was really hard emotionally. And that goes hand in hand with dealing with my emotional, right? Because if I had dealt with my emotional first, I would have had the confidence to do that a little bit easier. And now, another one to piggyback off of that is I wouldn't have done cheat meals the way that I did it. I would go strict keto or strict calorie restriction, really strict. And then on the weekend, one day out of the week, I would blow it. I would go eat something stupid, something earth-shatteringly ludicrous. Like I would go, curly fries, and I wouldn't get fast food, but I'd go get junk, right? And it's like, that is not the best way to do it. That might scratch a psychological itch for a second, but it's actually an emotional roller coaster to do that. And you actually metabolically damage yourself. You have all kinds of metabolic gridlock that can occur. You're having mixes of fats and carbs, which are not good from the mitochondrial perspective. But most of all, you are probably undoing 2 or 3 or 4, or even all of the days of the week in terms of your effort in one meal because your resting metabolic rate has dropped. So your ability to handle calories goes down. And then you load up with like a 4,000 calorie cheat meal. I just would not have done that. The last thing that we would have done different, and this is not a banger to end on, it's just an interesting one, I would have used bee pollen and or honey sooner. That was like the way that I started getting more nutritional value in. It's like my antioxidant load was decently high, but I was never eating a ton of veggies or a ton of fruits. And then honey came into the equation and I realized it didn't make me gain weight. It actually made me lose fat and it made me stay leaner. And it did something for me. It helped my immune system and all these things. So bottom line was like, I think it's a metaphor for opening my mind a little bit more. The honey was a game changer for me. But if you don't like the sugar in honey, I still recommend bee pollen, right? It's like a multivitamin, really. A tablespoon of that stuff, vitamins A, D, C, E, and K. You've got all the B vitamins. You've got quercetin. You've got kaempferol. You've got all these cool things that are in bee pollen. It's an awesome compound. Anyway, if I could talk to my old self 16 years ago, as cheesy as it sounds, I'd tell him it's going to be okay and that you can do this without becoming a complete like robotic basket case to every single like orthorexic tendency that's out there. Like, you can do this and you can apply the science and you can deal with the root cause that is making you overweight in the first place. I'll see you tomorrow.